The alarm shrieked through the crystalline corridors of the Valdrian High Command, its piercing wail making Ambassador Cathari's gill slits flutter with anxiety. She pressed her webbed fingers against the communication panel, her silver scales reflecting the pulsing red emergency lights. "Report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had negotiated peace treaties across 17 star systems. "Ambassador," Communications Officer Relax stammered, his usually composed demeanor cracking like ice on a warming moon. "We have a situation. The monitoring station at Kepler 442 has detected something impossible." Cathari's large dart eyes narrowed. In her 40 cycles of diplomatic service, he had learned that impossible usually meant unprecedented, and unprecedented meant dangerous. "Show me." The holographic display materialized before them, showing the outer rim of Valdrian space. A single red dot moved steadily through the star chart, but it wasn't the dot that made Cathari's breathing apparatus wheeze with shock. It was the data scrolling beside it. "That signature," she whispered. "Confirm the identification." "Confirmed, Ambassador. It's a Terran vessel. UTS Resilience, Ranger-class Deep Space Explorer. But that's not the concerning part." Cathari felt her secondary hearts skip a beat. The Terrans, humans, had been missing for over 30 standard years. After first contact had gone catastrophically wrong, after the siege of Proxima, where a single human battle group had held off the entire Third Valdrian Armada for 6 months, using nothing but modified mining equipment and sheer stubbornness, the humans had simply vanished. "What's the concerning part, Officer Relax?" "They're not alone, Ambassador. Long-range sensors detect massive fleet movements in the Void Nebula. Hundreds of signatures. Unknown configuration, but the energy readings..." He swallowed hard. "They're off the scale." Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UTS Resilience, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she watched the Valdrian border stations through the main viewport. Her crew of 37 moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had spent the last 3 decades exploring the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. "Distance to Valdrian space?" she asked without turning around. 47 minutes at current speed, Captain," replied her navigation officer, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb. "Their patrol ships are maintaining distance, but they're definitely tracking us." "Good. They should be." Chen finally turned to face her crew. At 68, she was old for a deep space captain, but her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made her famous during the Proxima siege. "Open a channel to Valdrian High Command. Priority diplomatic frequency." The communications array hummed to life. "Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Union ship Resilience. I request immediate attendance with the Valdrian Council. We bring urgent intelligence regarding a threat to all sentient life in this galaxy. This is not a military incursion, this is a warning." In the Valdrian Council chamber, Ambassador Cathari stood before the assembled representatives of 43 species. The chamber, a marvel of bioengineered coral and living light, had hosted diplomatic sessions for over 1,000 years. Today, it buzzed with anxiety. "Explain to me," demanded Councillor Vorthak, his insectoid features twitching with irritation, "how a single human ship expects us to believe they come in peace. Last time we met humans, they turned our asteroid mining platforms into weapons of mass destruction." Cathari had been present at that battle. She remembered how Captain Chen herself had used gravity tethers, meant for hauling asteroids, to literally throw space rocks at Valdrian dreadnoughts, like a child skipping stones across water. "Perhaps," suggested Councillor Mirileth, her crystalline form chiming softly, "we should listen to what they have to say. Humans may be unpredictable, but they have never lied in formal diplomatic contact. The chamber's central display activated, showing Captain Chen's weathered face. Even through the holographic projection, her presence seemed to fill the room. "Honourable councillors," Chen began, her voice steady despite the 13 years that had passed since their last contact. "I'm going to cut straight to the point because time is something we don't have much of. The reason humanity disappeared from known space wasn't because we were afraid, or because we were planning an invasion. We left because we found something that scared us more than any war ever could." She paused, letting that sink in. The councillors exchanged nervous glances. Humanity, feared across the galaxy for their adaptability and tactical creativity, had been scared enough to abandon their expanding colonies. Hey viewers, if you're enjoying this story about humanity's return, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. And trust me, this is just the beginning. 3 decades ago, our deep space exploration vessels detected signals from beyond the galactic rim. Not communications, hunting calls. A species we've designated the Devourers has been systematically consuming galaxy after galaxy, stripping worlds bare of all biological matter before moving on. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft bubbling of the atmospheric processes. They're approximately 18 months away from this galaxy's outer rim. When they arrive, they won't negotiate. They won't take prisoners. They will consume every living thing they encounter and convert the biomass into more ships, more soldiers, more consumption. Councillor Vorfak's mandibles clicked skeptically. "And I suppose humanity has spent 30 years preparing to save us all?" Chen's expression remained neutral. "We've spent 30 years preparing to fight the unwinnable war, Councillor. But not alone. Humanity learned something during our conflicts with the Valdrean Confederacy. We're stronger when we work together." "Work together?" Cathari leaned forward. "Captain, with respect, your species excels at turning farming equipment into weapons of war. The Devourers sound like a threat requiring massive industrial capacity, coordinated defense networks, unified command structures. These are not human strengths." For the first time, Chen smiled. "Ambassador Cathari, you're absolutely right. Humans excel at improvisation, at finding unconventional solutions to impossible problems. But you know what we excel at even more?" She gestured to someone off-screen. The chamber's display split, showing dozens of new faces, clearly human, but representing a staggering diversity of ethnic backgrounds and ages. "Learning. For 30 years, we've been studying every species in the galaxy. Not just your military capabilities, your cultures, your strengths, your unique approaches to problems. Dr. Martinez here spent 15 years living with the Christech Collective, learning their computational mathematics. Commander Singh embedded with Valdrean mining crews to understand your industrial engineering. Captain Okafor studied with the ethereal navigators to master their predictive mathematics." The implications hit the councillors like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been becoming new. "We return not as conquerors," Chen continued, "but as students who have finally graduated. We offer the Valdrean Confederacy and all allied species a complete defensive strategy, combining human tactical flexibility with Valdrean industrial might, Christech computational power, and ethereal prescience. If this revelation is blowing your mind like it's blowing mine, smash that like button, And stick around, because the best part is still coming. Deep in the Valdrian Strategic Command Center, General Fex pulled up the preliminary data from the human proposal. His 4 arms moved independently across multiple control surfaces as he analyzed the information. "This is," he began, then stopped. As a career military officer, he prided himself on decisive language. But what he was seeing defied easy categorization. The humans had designed what they called the Galaxy Defense Grid, a network of automated stations positioned at strategic points throughout the spiral arms. But these weren't traditional weapon platforms. They were something else entirely. "Communications relay stations?" his aide, Colonel Ferrin, asked uncertainly. "Look deeper." Fex commanded, each station combines Valdrian quantum manufacturing with Crystech processing cores and ethereal probability engines. They're not weapons, they're force multipliers. The true genius of the human plan became clear as Fex studied the specifications. The stations wouldn't fight the Devourers directly. Instead, they would enable unprecedented coordination between allied fleets, allowing species to fight in perfect synchronization despite being scattered across the galaxy. But that wasn't the most impressive part. "General," Phelan said quietly, "look at the resource requirements." Fex did. His mandibles clicked in amazement. The humans had designed the entire system to be built using existing Valdrian industrial infrastructure. No new technologies required, no massive resource investments. Just a clever reconfiguration of existing capabilities. "They've weaponized our own efficiency," he murmured. "Brilliant." Back in the council chamber, Captain Chen was explaining the operational timeline. "Construction can begin immediately using existing Valdrian orbital foundries. The Crystech Collective has already agreed to provide processing courses. The ethereal navigators are calculating optimal positioning. We estimate full deployment in 14 months, 4 months before the Devourers arrive." "And what?" asked Councillor Miralaith, her crystalline voice carrying harmonic undertones of skepticism. "Does humanity require in return for this gift?" Chen's expression grew serious. "Partnership. Not subjugation, not tribute, partnership. When this is over, assuming we survive, humanity wants full membership in the Galactic Council. We want to stop being the scary unknown on the edge of space and start being part of the solution." The chamber buzzed with whispered conversations in a dozen languages. Kethari found herself considering the implications. Humanity had always been formidable as outsiders. What would they become as allies? "There is," Chen continued, "one more thing." Her voice took on a tone that made every councillor pay attention. "The defense grid requires a command structure that can process information and make tactical decisions faster than any single species can manage. It requires a hybrid consciousness that combines human intuition, Valdrian logic, Crystech computation, and ethereal prescience." "You're talking about a mind melt," Kethari breathed. "A permanent psychic link between representatives of 4 species." "We're talking about evolution," Chen corrected. "About becoming something greater than the sum of our parts. About giving up individual control in exchange for collective survival." The chamber fell silent. What Chen was proposing wasn't just military alliance. It was the birth of a new form of consciousness. 3 hours later, the vote was unanimous. 6 months into construction, the first defense grid stations came online, and something remarkable happened. The hybrid command consciousness didn't just coordinate military responses. It began solving problems none of the species had been able to tackle alone. Valdrian industrial accidents that had been inevitable for centuries became preventable when combined with human pattern recognition and ethereal probability calculation. Christech computational paradoxes resolved themselves when approached with human creative thinking and Valdrian methodical analysis. The Alliance wasn't just preparing for war, it was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. When the Devourers finally arrived, they found not the scattered competing civilizations they had consumed in 17 previous galaxies, but a unified defense network that anticipated their every move, adapted to their tactics in real time, and fought with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. The battle lasted 8 months, not because the Allied forces were losing, but because they were winning so efficiently that they could afford to study their enemy, to understand the Devourer's technology and biology, to find a solution that didn't require extinction. In the end, they didn't destroy the Devourers. They cured them. The consuming hunger that drove the species turned out to be a genetic modification imposed by an even older enemy, one that had used the Devourers as weapons against countless galaxies before being destroyed by their own creations. With Christech computational power modelling the genetics, ethereal prescience guiding the research, Valdrian engineering building the delivery systems, and human creativity finding the unexpected connections, they were able to reverse millions of years of biological warfare. The Devourers became the Gardeners, using their vast fleets not to consume life, but to seed them across the empty galaxies they had previously ravaged. All right, that was intense, but I want to know, if you were Captain Chen, what would have been your approach to convincing the Valdrian Council? Drop your strategy in the comments below. Would you have led with the threat, the solution, or something completely different? Captain Sarah Chen stood once again on the bridge of the UTS Resilience, but now she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Ambassador Cathari, General Thex, and Computation Prime Nexus 77, the Christech representative. Together, they watched as the first joint human-Valdrian Christech ethereal colony ship departed for the Andromeda Galaxy. You know, Katari said, her gill slits fluttering with what Chen had learned was the Valdrian equivalent of a smile. When your species first appeared in our space, we thought you were just clever barbarians with dangerous weapons. Chen chuckled. To be fair, we were. But we learned something important during our exile. The most dangerous weapon isn't the one that destroys, it's the one that builds. Through the viewport, the stars seemed brighter somehow, as if the galaxy itself was celebrating the impossible peace that had emerged from the threat of total annihilation. Humanity had returned not as conquerors or refugees, but as partners in the greatest collaboration the universe had ever seen. And in the deep space beyond, converted Devourer ships worked alongside Allied vessels, planting seeds of life on worlds that had been barren for millions of years, turning the galaxy's greatest threat into its greatest hope. The signal protocol that had started as a warning had become something else entirely. A promise that when thinking beings chose cooperation over competition, there was no challenge too great to overcome. Thanks for watching this epic tale of humanity's return. If you enjoyed this story, you'll love our other HFY adventures. Subscribe for more stories of human ingenuity, alien alliances, and impossible victories. Until next time, remember in space, no one can hear you innovate.